Hi everyone, this is Donna and welcome to Creative Pixie Designs. This is a celebratory hop for Katharine Kelly, the founder of Team Tiny on Facebook, who has reached over 1,000 subscribers here on YouTube. We're all coming together to help her celebrate in reaching this milestone with a video hop as well as some prizes from our generous sponsors. For my card today, I was inspired by one of Katharine's previous videos using alcohol inks to create a background. I will be using several shades of blue and aqua alcohol inks to create a background for my card today. I'm starting out by grabbing a piece of alcohol ink cardstock by Ranger, which I'm going to emboss it with a mermaid scale embossing folder. With alcohol inks, you do want to make sure that you are working in a well-ventilated area for safety reasons. I'm starting my background by generously adding the alcohol ink to my cardstock, and then I used a dropper to add some rubbing alcohol to move that color around. I believe this is aquamarine alcohol ink that I've added first, and I'm kind of tilting my paper back and forth to see if I can get some of that ink to move. I'm adding in my second color, which is aqua alcohol ink, quite heavily and randomly across my panel, and then I will try to get that ink to mix and move with an old marker spritzer. Here I'm adding quite a dark color. This is sailboat blue, and I'm adding that to my panel, and then I will come in with the alcohol blending solution and just add a few drops here and there, and again I move that color around with the marker spritzer. Then I'm coming in with turquoise alcohol ink, and I'm just kind of adding it to the outer edges of the panel. I'm trying to cover the entire panel with some color. And finally, I think this is the last color that I add. This is mermaid alcohol ink. I'm adding that to my panel to tone down some of that blue and bring in some of that aqua and greenish color. After I move that ink around and get it to mix with my other layers of color, I'm going to add a little bit of silver mixative. I'm just adding a few drops randomly, and then I'm going to grab my blending solution to get that ink to move around. And once I have that completed, I can set aside my panel to dry while I work on the coloring. For the focal point images on this card, I'm using Sugar Pea Designs Mermaid Kisses, which I've stamped onto a piece of Nina Solar White 80-pound cardstock with Memento Tuxedo black ink. I do have the caps of the markers that I'm using up on the side of the screen, and if you're interested in any of the other combinations that I used, I will have that information over on my blog, which I will link to down below. So while I color, I'll talk about the giveaway for this celebratory hop. So this is a hashtag driven hop, and basically what that means is that all of the participants in this hop can be found by clicking the hashtag in my title. So you won't see the next participant listed in the description area like you typically would, but you can click on the hashtag in the title, or if you open the description area, you can pull up the search for all of the hop participants. Please do take the time to visit each video and leave a comment at each stop. Also, please consider subscribing to support all of the smaller channels in this hop. The more channels you leave comments on, the more chances you will have to win from the many prizes available. Some prizes are for continental US residents, so please include that information in your comments as well. I will have all of the details with the requirements and prices available listed in the drop-down box below, so be sure to check that information out. Okay, so back to the coloring. I've colored up her skin with the markers that you see on the side of my screen, and here I'm just giving her some rosy cheeks with an R20. Now these are tiny images, so there's not a whole lot of room to add shading, but I'm using the darkest shade, which is E13, and I'm just adding that almost at where the stamped line of the image is, just to add a little bit of shading, and then I can use the rest of the markers to blend out and create some depth. For her hair, I'm using some really light colors to create a blonde mermaid. I'm using E50, E51, E53, and E55. I'm starting her hair by adding the lightest shade, E50, over the entire hair section of this image. And for hair, I typically will color from the lightest shade and moving in until I reach my darkest shade. This way I won't add too much of that dark color until I see where that light shade is going to be. After I add the lightest shade, I'm coming in with my second to lightest shade, and I'm just adding in some flick marks where the hair is gathered around her hair clip and at the part. Also, the part of her hair that is layered underneath the hair that's on top will have some of the darker shading. I'm going across each of these sections of her hair by adding the darker shading more towards the edges and leaving the center for the highlight. With each darker shade that I'm adding just a little bit less in the flick length as well as the quantity of the flicks. In other words, I'm leaving some spaces in between the flicks of the darker shades than the lighter shades. I hope all of that made sense in my explanation. So here I'm adding in E55, which is the darkest shade. I'm flicking in just at the base of where I've added E53, and I'm not clustering my E55 as closely as I did the previous shades of marker. For the mermaid's tail, I'm using a few of the red violet shades. And I'll be honest, I had a little trouble with getting this combination to work and blend as seamlessly as I wanted. It did take a little extra blending and layering of the shades to get somewhat of a smooth look. I've started by adding the RV66 at the outer edges of her tail, and then I came in blending this with an RV63. Once I've added that shade, I'm coming in with an RV10, and between RV63 and RV10 is a large range in shades, and so I just had a little trouble getting that blend, and I went back and forth adding a little more RV66 and then blending it out with RV10 to achieve more of a smoother look. I still was not 100% happy with the outcome of that tail, so when in doubt, add some texture with a white gel pen. I'm adding in some small dots and some large dots, and this will help to create a more of a sparkly look after I was finished. For the little rock that she's sitting on, I'm using some warm grays to color that in. I am starting with a W7 and I'm just adding that darkest shade to basically the outline of the image, and I'm adding in a few of the extra marks as well as going over the artist drawn lines. I am going around the bottom part of her tail because as she's sitting on top of that rock, that would create a cast shadow. I will blend out the W7 with the W5, and then I come in with the W3 to finish off the darkest shade of this rock. And finally, the last two shades, the W1 and W0, I reserve those for my highlights on this rock. I do go over this image twice, and actually that's pretty typical of my coloring. I do go over all of my images at least twice, sometimes even a little bit more. And after I did that for this image, I am coming in with my darkest shade to create a little bit of texture by adding some dot detail. And I am adding that W7 just in kind of the darkest areas of the rock, and I'll finish things off with a white gel pen. So at this point I have my background, which is nice and dry, and my image, which is, I used my brother's Scan and Cut to cut it out. Next I'm going to work on my sentiment, and I have a piece of black cardstock which I've treated with anti-static powder, and then I can stamp out my sentiment using Versamark ink. I'm adding my white embossing powder, and I can heat set that in place using my heat tool. I die cut a piece of vellum using a stitched circle die to kind of tone down the background directly behind the image so that my little mermaid will stand out against that bright background. I have the background popped up on a piece of fun foam just to give it a little stability, and then I'm adhering it to a top folding A2 size white card base. I've added foam squares to the back of my images as well as the sentiment, and then I can add those to my card to finish things off. I've added the mermaid image with foam squares, and then I've turned it over and I can add the liquid adhesive and secure the vellum piece to my panel. I do add a couple of black enamel dots to the vellum piece to finish off my card. So I'd like to thank each and every one of you hopping along and supporting us during this hop. Don't forget to click on the hashtag in my title to see all of the other designers that are part of this hop. Also, be sure to check out the description area below for all of the details regarding the giveaway and how you can enter to win all of the amazing prizes from our generous sponsors. I have linked a couple of other videos that you may be interested in and checking those out after this hop. As always, thank you so much for stopping by, and I will see you next time.